Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the work session of the Asheville City Council. This is the second work session regarding the possible revisions to a hotel zoning ordinance. And we're going to jump right into things. We have our planning director, Todd Okolachaney, who's going to walk us through a presentation regarding the different considerations with the revised hotel ordinance. Take it away, Todd.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, Mayor and council members and members of the public. As the Mayor stated, this is a continuation from the October 13th work session with council on proposed hotel development standards. Next slide, please. As a quick recap from the October 13th work session with council, there were several key takeaways that I reviewed with council, such as some of the regulatory requirements from the state as it pertains to regulating land uses such as hotels, some findings from the Urban Land Institute report on hotels about development impacts related to that land use. And then we also covered several innovative tools to regulate hotel development approvals. Next slide, please. At the October 13th work session, we ended up covering two of the three main recommendations from staff. Those two recommendations centered on a new hotel overlay district and new development and operational standards for hotels. We also reviewed public benefits and a table that was created to help incentivize public benefits in exchange for a staff level review instead of a city council conditional zoning process. The one outstanding main recommendation that we didn't have a chance to cover is related to a revised design review process for hotel development. Next slide, please. So we're going to focus on this new recommendation, or a recommendation rather that we didn't cover at the last meeting, which again is revising our current design review process for hotels and other land use types within the city. Next slide, please. The desired outcome of changing our design review process is to improve and enhance great architecture and design within the city. This is a recommendation that is from the Urban Land Institute report on hotel development, as well as the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan strategy to try to enhance what buildings and our built environment looks like, particularly as it relates to hotels. For this recommendation, the idea is that we would recommend combining an existing design review process that currently lies within the Downtown Commission and under the purview of the Riverfront Commission for reviewing the design of hotels and other types of land uses within those areas. The way the current process is for design review is that larger projects over a certain size are typically reviewed by the Downtown Commission for all land uses, including commercial, residential, institutional uses, for example, are all reviewed by the Downtown Commission for projects that are located within the Central Business District. And in the Riverfront area, all larger projects are reviewed by the Riverfront Commission. Those two bodies have subcommittees that include designers and architects that review projects to see how it aligns with currently adopted design guidelines for those areas. Outside of our historic districts, the downtown and riverfront areas are the only areas in the city where we have separate design guidelines that are located in a design manual. Some of those guidelines are codified in our UDO, our Unified Development Ordinance, while others are standalone within that design manual document. So again, our recommendation from staff is to consolidate the functions of design review that currently fall under the Downtown and Riverfront Commissions and combine those functions into one single design review board or commission. We feel like this would help to strengthen and streamline the design review process and allow those commissions to focus on other priorities related to socio-economic issues within those areas, for example. Combining the design review processes into one single design review board would also apply administrative or staff level review and council review. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide, please.
Todd, quick question. There would continue to be different design guidelines for downtown and the riverfront, right? You're not also proposing to have a common set of design guidelines for both of those places.
That's correct. In general, we have design guidelines that are very specific for the downtown or central business district. Subsequent slides. One question that often comes up is what is the difference between development standards and design guidelines, and what would a design review board typically review? So today, our downtown and riverfront commissions review design guidelines and projects to see how they align with those guidelines. Those are typically located within a separate design manual that's separate from our Unified Development Ordinance, or otherwise known as our zoning code. We also have a set of development standards and operational standards for all uses that are codified in the city's Unified Development Ordinance, or our zoning code. Those development standards are reviewed by staff. So when we receive a site plan, they're very objective standards and requirements that have to be met. As an example, in the left column, in the top row, an example of a development standard would be that a building has a minimum front setback of 5 feet that is required. It's very objective. A new building has to be set back 5 feet from a property line. Moving over to the right-hand side of this table, a similar design guideline for the location or siting of a building would be that buildings should be located on the site such that they are open to and relate to the river. This is a more subjective guideline that would be found in a design manual, and the type of guideline that would typically be reviewed by a design review body or a board or commission rather than staff because of the subjectivity to that. We do feel that as a best practice, there are many cities throughout the country and even in North Carolina that do have separate design review commissions that do review projects for these more subjective type of design guidelines. That we have a goal, though, with this is to improve the design of new hotels within the city. Another example of a development standard that would be found in our zoning code is that the maximum allowable height is 145 feet. That's the maximum height. You can't exceed that. The design guideline example that would be similar to that would say something like this: the height of structures should not eclipse or compete with distant views and/or historic structures. And that would be a way to, again, improve the location and height of a building so that it does not negatively impact adjacent buildings, such as an historic building in downtown, or compete with a distant view. And that would be subject to the review and approval by this new design review commission. Finally, the last example is that a standard would be related to fenestration or otherwise windows, that a certain number of windows might be required on the facade of the building, whereas a design guideline would say something like this: that building materials should be of a high quality, or that prototypical architectural designs are discouraged. Prototypical architectural designs meaning kind of a chain type hotel that we might see. So again, these are very subjective guidelines, but nonetheless would be up to the responsibility of a new design review body to review that. This slide hopefully answers some of the questions from Councilmember Smith related to the makeup of the new design review board and its membership. Staff is recommending that the new design review board would have 9 members who are residents of the city, and that a majority of the members shall have a special interest, experience, or training in architecture, historic preservation, building construction, landscape architecture, urban planning, or related fields. The intent of the membership and this recommendation for the makeup of the body is that someone who has a special interest could serve on the board. We have had a lot of discussion at the downtown riverfront commissions about making sure that we're ensuring that this new board is representative and diverse. It's representative of the city, and that we're not excluding any folks from serving on the board. So we added this language, again, that refers to someone having a special interest and not necessarily having to have training necessarily in architecture, for example, or urban planning to serve on the board. The other recommendation that staff has is that the downtown riverfront commissions, that they ought to designate 1 qualified member to serve on the board if that's possible. That way we would continue to maintain a similar makeup like we have today, where we have downtown and riverfront representation on their respective design review bodies. We also recommend that there could be preference, preference could be given to persons with disabilities, transit users, or seniors, basically folks that are impacted by designs of buildings. This would be a new recommendation that I'm not sure any of our boards currently have today. Next slide, please. To give you an example of the existing design review process versus the proposed process, if you look at the table on the left-hand side of the screen, this outlines the existing responsibility of our current boards and commissions. So the Asheville Area Riverfront Redevelopment Commission and the Downtown Commission today review projects that are larger projects in the Central Business District and in the riverfront areas for design review compliance. And that includes all uses, including hotels, residential, office uses, for example. And then the Historic Resources Commission reviews all larger projects that are in one of our 4 local historic districts. Under the proposed design review process, again, we would consolidate the design review functions of the Downtown and Riverfront Commissions into a new Asheville Design Review Board. And then that board would review all larger projects within the downtown and riverfront areas. That would include residential projects, office, retail, restaurants, institutional uses. But the addition here, and this would be a change to the way our process currently is, that the design review board would also review all hotels within the citywide. And they would use the new design guidelines that we've drafted for hotels as the guide to try to improve the design of new hotels in the city. So again, the difference with the design review board is that they would operate mainly for new projects in the downtown and riverfront areas, but for any new hotel, they would review those hotels citywide, whether they're located in the downtown or riverfront area or anywhere else in the city. Next slide, please. With that, that's basically a general overview of the new design review process and a good stopping point in case any council members have any questions.
I have a question, Todd. So I know when Downtown Commission does design review, you have mandatory review and voluntary compliance. How does that fit in here?
The new process actually aims to get us in the one step direction closer toward having mandatory compliance. But the way we would have that is this would be an incentive. So if you recall at the October 13th work session, we reviewed a development process chart for development review of what the new development review process would look like. In order for a project to be approved at the staff level, a project has to meet one of three standards or criteria. Number one, the project has to meet all of the development standards in our UDO, in our zoning code. Number two, they have to meet the threshold for the points system for our public benefits. And number three, the project would have to get a positive recommendation from this new design review board. And the goal of that is that we're trying to say that a project has to meet the design guidelines. It's almost mandatory to meet the design guidelines if you want to be reviewed at a staff level. If a project were to receive a negative recommendation from the new design review board, that would automatically trigger city council review under our process that we're recommending.
So, Todd, would this would not eliminate either the Downtown Commission or the River Redevelopment Commission, right?
That's correct. This would not replace those commissions. They would still operate today. Just the design review functions of those commissions would fall under this new board.
And have you had conversations with those two boards? I'm on the Riverfront Redevelopment, but they've rescheduled their meetings and I now can't attend them. So if you've talked to them, I don't know. So what is their response to this?
Sure. So we had a couple of conversations with the Downtown and Riverfront Commissions. The Downtown Commission, when we first presented the hotel development recommendations to them, they did not take a specific vote on this specific item for the new design review function, but they did have a motion to continue this process, which we have through the extension of the moratorium. Mm-hmm. We'd like to go back to that commission and get some feedback. If there's any new guidance or recommendations that they have, we'd like to do that. The Riverfront Commission also did review this, and they have not supported the new design review body at this time. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of discussions about the makeup of the new design review board and getting into some of the weeds about what that makeup would look like. But another item I should mention at the Downtown Commission that was brought up from a member is that there was a thought that we ought to improve our current design guidelines first, that our downtown design guidelines are a decade old. Riverfront design guidelines are old as well. And there's been interest from both the Downtown Riverfront Commissions to update those design guidelines, mm-hmm. and that we should strengthen those guidelines first. As I mentioned, we have drafted new design guidelines that would pertain just to hotels. And we think that creating a new design review board might actually help to prioritize possibly updating design guidelines within the downtown riverfront. But again, I do understand that perspective from the Downtown Commission members as well about trying to update our current guidelines first.
Todd, I wonder, oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask, so the existing committees don't go away. Is this new committee actually made up of members of those two committees? Or is this just a new committee that will take over these functions?
This would be a new board, a new City of Asheville board or commission that would take over the design review functions. We're recommending that at least one member from the Downtown Riverfront Commission, this would be outlined in the, I guess, the bylaws for that commission, that we have at least one member representing both of those commissions. But it's possible also because we have several members that serve on the subcommittee of the Downtown Riverfront Commission today that are part of the design review process that, I mean, anecdotally, staff feels like those would be some good members to start with if this new board were created, that we do already have a good pool of volunteer members that could serve on the board.
And
Yeah,
Todd,
I would,
yeah, quasi judicial board, right?
They would have it would be a quasi judicial process for design review, but it's again, it is a recommending
Why
body
is it a
though.
quasi judicial review, design review?
Well, I guess it would.
It's not, it's a,
I should clarify that it would follow our current design review process. That would not change. That there would be a set of design guidelines, and they would provide a recommendation to City Council. I mentioned that just the quasi judicial aspect of it is that in a hybrid sort of way, that if that design review board gives a negative recommendation, then it automatically triggers City Council review.
so I don't think we're using the phrase quasi judicial correctly here. It just means it.
Yeah, and I should
be,
clarify.
I thought it would come to council as a conditional zoning, or would it come as a conditional use permit?
It would come to council as a conditional zoning, and that's
Okay,
where
so it's not quasi judicial.
no, and I'm sorry for the confusion.
You're
Yeah,
just throwing around. You're talking like a lawyer. Okay, I got it.
Todd, one suggestion I might have in terms of getting particularly the Riverfront Redevelopment Commission on board is, if perhaps it's two people from each committee, each of the existing commissions rather than just one. I can't remember how many people are on the Riverfront Redevelopment Design Subcommittee, but I think it's 3 or 4 or something like that. If I just, having been on that commission for a while, I know that this is a big issue for them, and I can understand their reluctance to let go of it. But if they have guaranteed good representation on that new commission, where they feel confident that their members that are there are representing the interests of the riverfront and the Riverfront Redevelopment Commission, I think that might help them to support it, because there are certainly a lot of other members on the commission itself that have nothing to do with design and bring no expertise to that conversation. So
thank you.
I just need a little bit of clarity. I'm just a bit lost. So this new board will look at hotel designs or all design review?
The new design review board would review all land use types within the downtown and riverfront areas for all land use types, just in those two areas. But outside of the downtown and outside of the riverfront area, the new design review board would only review hotels. So if a project were located in South Asheville, just we'll say on Airport Road, if it's a hotel project, that would be reviewed by this new design review board. If on Airport Road, it's a multifamily residential project, that would not be reviewed by this new design review board.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions or comments at this stage? And I think we're going to keep moving through the presentation.
yeah, and just again, Todd, to be clear, if and when the development guidelines are redone for downtown and the riverfront, those would continue to be separate. The only common set of guidelines that this new commission would use would be those for hotels. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Moving along in the presentation, I thought it would be helpful for us to have some further discussion about all these 3 major recommendations in their entirety, and to try to recap some of the comments, questions, and concerns that you all brought up at the last work session on October 13th. Next slide, please. One of the questions that came up at the October 13th work session was related to the development review process. If you recall, we reviewed a new development review process flow chart where if we would first identify the location of a new hotel, and this is only related to hotels now, we'd ask the question of whether that hotel is located in the new hotel overlay district And if the answer is yes, you go through one process on the left-hand side of this chart. And if no, the answer is no, it's automatic council review. If you recall, at the last work session, the flow chart included two types of council review. The first being a conditional zoning, that if a project is located outside of the hotel overlay district, it could be a conditional zoning review, which is the way you review hotel projects today. Or we had an option at the last meeting that also showed an option to expand the zoning district. And this is just it was a detail in there, but we left some flexibility at the time that if you had a piece of property that's located just outside of the hotel overlay, for example, there was an option that a hotelier could ask to expand the overlay district into that other parcel. We've removed that option to try to simplify the development review process. So now it's just staff level review or council review via conditional zoning. So we've eliminated the option to expand the overlay district. And again, we thought this is just an easier process to understand for the community and for developers, that if you're in the hotel overlay district, you might have the opportunity to be reviewed at a staff level if the project complies with development standards, public benefits, gets a positive recommendation on design review, and is under all the council thresholds, such as building height. However, if a project is located outside of the overlay district, or if that project exceeds our council threshold, such as if a project exceeds 100 feet in height, it would automatically trigger a conditional zoning review process by council.
And
next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, Julie.
Well, yeah. So are we saying once we set these boundaries, then they basically can't be tinkered with except through a bigger process. They can't be tinkered with parcel by parcel. We would have to say to the staff, please go back and look at this and look at changing some of the boundaries. That's the only way it could be expanded.
So the under this recommended change, the review process, the applicant would be requesting to rezone their property via conditional zoning. So this would be a site plan and a rezoning application in one that would come to council, where you would review the site plan along with the rezoning request. It would be rezoned to a conditional zoning district.
That would then expand the hotel overlay district. Is that right?
It technically it wouldn't. What we're recommending is that we have a commercial expansion district, it's called. So the new zoning category would be a commercial expansion conditional zoning district. And again, it would be a conditional zoning process, which includes a rezoning of the property and a site plan. And the difference before, the option that we had to actually expand the overlay district had the potential of coming to council, that option, but it would have been a rezoning application, only a map change with no site plan. Right. And I think that's where some of the confusion was, that we had an option where an applicant could request to be rezoned to the new hotel overlay district, but it would only be a rezoning with no site plan. And we thought that might be difficult for council to make a decision based on that.
Yeah, I agree with that. So again, just so I'm clear, so then once we set this hotel overlay district, that's it until we decide to revisit those boundaries in a significant way rather than parcel by parcel.
That's correct.
Okay.
And Todd, wouldn't what you just said, the council thresholds, like if the project was over 100 feet, wouldn't it automatically go to council review? I'm just wondering if number 4 in the blue section really shouldn't be up in the yellow.
That's true. Yeah. But I could see that change happening in the table or a clarification. You're right. If in that yellow box, question would also be right away is the project underneath the council thresholds, such as building height. We do have a requirement that says if a hotel is over 100 feet, it automatically triggers council review through conditional zoning.
Right. I just think that maybe, putting that council threshold up at the top would be more clear.
Absolutely. Thank you. A question that's come up in some of our conversations at the Riverfront Commission and with the community is whether we ought to also have a new council review threshold that would place an upper limit on the number of hotel rooms for any particular project. So that the table on the right shows you a couple of examples of what this could look like. The yellow highlighted row indicates how many hotel projects council would have reviewed if we had a cap on the limit on number of hotel rooms for any given hotel project. So for example, if we had a hotel project with 115 or more hotel rooms, council would have reviewed 8 such projects over the last 10 years. If you look at the hotels that were approved over the last 10 years. So 8 of those, or roughly 1 hotel per year, would have been reviewed by council if we added a new threshold for any particular hotel project that puts a cap on the number of rooms for that project. Overall, in the last column, at 115 or more rooms, that would represent 22 hotels over the lifetime of all hotels ever approved within the city. We have about 85 hotels approved overall, and roughly at 22 hotels, roughly a quarter of those are 115 or more rooms, just to give you an idea of what that might look like. On the other end of the table, a hotel that's 135 or more rooms, council would only have reviewed 3 of such hotels over the last 10 years if we had placed a cap on the number of hotel rooms for any given project. Overall, out of 85 hotels in the history of Asheville, those larger hotels over 135 rooms represents 10 hotels. So again, just wanted to give you some examples that if council wished to place another new threshold in addition to building height, where council would review any project over a certain size, these are some examples that we want to show you. And again, a good stopping point if there's any comments or questions.
Well, I, for one, would be supportive of adding another threshold based on the number of rooms in addition to the height. Because I could imagine maybe a big complex that is only 2 stories or 3 stories high, but takes a big, huge footprint. So I would be interested in adopting an additional threshold, maybe even 100 rooms, more than 100 rooms.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of the impactful things about several of our current hotels is that they take up an entire length of a city block, or an entire, even a short side of a city block. So they're larger than a lot of our other buildings. But remind us. I always feel bad about asking you this on the spur of the moment, but how many rooms does the AC have? And the aloft, those are just 2 easy ones for me to envision.
The aloft is 115 rooms, and it's 94 feet in height. And the AC hotel is 132 rooms. The Eris Hotel has 128 rooms as another example.
How about the Cambria?
Cambria is 136 rooms. So for example, if you were to put a cap on 115 rooms that would trigger that threshold, council would have reviewed the Cambria Hotel, the AC Hotel, Hilton Garden Inn in downtown, Hyatt Place in downtown. The Aloft is 115 rooms, so if it's, you're about, you would possibly review that project. Biltmore Station Hotel on Thompson Street, 117 rooms. So those are just some examples.
So where are those smaller hotels? I mean, there were almost half of the hotels, half of our 85 hotels were no. Sorry. I'm thinking about it the other way. Never mind.
And Todd, just to remind me, we consider like a small hotel to be 20 rooms or 30 rooms?
It's 20 rooms today, and our recommendation is to bump that up to 35 rooms.
Right. Okay.
And that large versus small hotel definition would really only apply to the hotel overlay map and where those size hotels would be located.
Right. So my take would be 100 rooms, but that, obviously subject to what other people think.
I would agree with that, Vice Mayor. I think Julie mentioned the same thing as far as the cap at 100 rooms.
Yeah, I mean, just to understand the practical implication of that. So it looks like certainly the recent hotels that we've seen in downtown have been, not just over 100 rooms, they've been over 115 rooms. Todd, is your sense that would probably just functionally mean that we would be reviewing every hotel that gets built downtown? Or, again, unless it's a really small hotel.
Ashley, can we bring up the presentation again? I'll open up that slide that has those thresholds that we reviewed. If we can go back one slide. Thank you. So the question, if the cap were placed at 100 rooms or more in the last 10 years, that would have meant that council would have reviewed 16 hotels. So approximately 1.5 hotels per year. And then about half of all of our hotels in the history of Asheville, about half of those are over 100 rooms. So I think the way to look at this is you would possibly review anywhere from 2 hotels per year to possibly half of all hotels that are proposed within the city.
Yeah.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, again, just understanding the practical implications of that. What that means is that it takes, it takes those projects out of the staff review path. So the public benefits, the design review, none of that. It just throws it all into the conditional zoning. It just keeps us where we are now, right?
No, probably you will see a modification of the proposals. I would imagine hoteliers would try to get under the threshold and bring smaller projects forward.
Yeah.
Or they would know that we'd be asking for the public benefit. They would know that we'd still probably be looking at the criteria that staff was looking at when we're looking at conditional zoning. I would have a hard time envisioning that city council would just be like, oh, no public benefits if it's 135 rooms.
Yeah. I guess, I'm in general, I think I am supportive of that threshold of 100. I guess what I don't know is, what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of, new hotels and, some people would say that one of the advantages of some of these larger hotels, including the 3 that you mentioned earlier, the Cambria, the AC, the Aloft, or the 4, the Heiress, is, all of those also have what many people would consider really nice public spaces, public restaurants, things like that. If you go to these smaller hotels, do you sort of lose that kind of public aspect to it because there's just not enough either space or revenue to include that kind of, more community amenity? And again, I realize some people don't think they're community amenities, but a lot of people do. So I just don't know practically what that means from a hotelier's perspective. I don't know the full implications of that. I'm not saying, again, I think that feels like the right threshold to me, but I would want us to explore functionally what that means for people in the hotel business.
And I think, if a project comes, if it's over 100 rooms and that's the cap that you desire, that the public benefits would still be used as a guide. We have that in the UDO, and we're saying this is what we'd like a hotel to meet. And I think it'll be up to the applicant to have that conversation with you all as council members as to why or why not can't they meet those public benefits. And again, it's those public benefits are meant to help mitigate the project. So that might be a good baseline for your review of any hotel project that comes before you. And to clarify as well, if a project comes to City Council for a conditional zoning review, the design review process would still be there. So the design review board would still review that project and provide a recommendation for design. Under the current process, if that did not change, that's the same process as today as well, that the Downtown Commission and Riverfront Commissions still provide a recommendation to City Council when there's a conditional zoning application.
Okay, so we added the size threshold as a trigger. Anything else that you all think staff should consider as a trigger to bring it to council for review?
We mentioned a maximum presence of hotels on a block, but I don't remember discussion around it. I don't know how many hotels would we consider a cluster and what radius we were looking at. So I just wanted to hear some more information or a conversation about how many would be too many on a block.
Yeah, I have that on a upcoming slide, but it might even be the next one. So we could certainly, it seems like a good time to discuss that now if we want to move on. And yes, thank you. So the spacing limitations, the second bullet to Councilwoman Smith's point, this is something that we briefly discussed at the last work session, that whether there's any interest in having like a separation requirement for hotels, for example, or whether we would have a maximum of hotels in any given block. It starts to get a little confusing of how we would calculate that. But for example, in the downtown, you could say that a certain percentage of a hotel building facade could not exceed a certain percentage of the block. Say like no more than 50% of the block could be used for a hotel use. This is something that the city of Charleston did in their, I believe in their newer hotel standards. However, looking at the makeup of the rest of the city outside the downtown, besides the downtown and some portions of Biltmore Village, we really don't have a good urban block system, a block grid, where that type of requirement might be harder to do in other areas of the city. As an extreme example, I would use the River Arts District, where you have some really large parcels that are really adjacent to a corridor. They have a very wide lot width and lot frontage. and looking and trying to apply a certain percentage of hotel in that district might be very difficult to achieve. The separation requirement is another possible consideration for spacing limitations. We're still exploring some of those options, but we at the staff level don't have any specific recommendation on that at this time.
Todd, I believe in the last work session, it came up that maybe someone would look at how many actual buildable lots would be available to hotels, say in the River Arts District or in the western portion of downtown. Has that been looked into any further? And I mean, and then maybe it's like for the River Arts District, we would want to look at the number of hotels, period, that you want to allow there. If we end up with 15 hotels in the River Arts District, that area is ruined, and for my purposes. So I mean, maybe we should look at an overall limit, period, in these areas.
We did perform some additional analysis, and I'll be sending you all probably a response following up this week that looks at some sample blocks in the city just to show what they look like and the types of land uses that are there. But we could certainly also provide some information about buildable lots. We would look at vacant lots or surface parking lots, underutilized lots that could be redeveloped. But again, the overlay district boundaries do show you kind of the maximum extent of where hotels could be permitted. But if we get more granular and look down lot by lot, we could certainly provide you all with that information. We did also discuss early on in this whether it was possible to have an overall cap on the number of hotels. Certainly, it's a tool that could be available in other states. I think from a legal perspective, there was some uncertainty as to whether having a cap is something that would be allowed in North Carolina, and that might be a little bit more difficult for us to have an overall cap on the number of hotels in any particular area.
But you could cap a block, but you could not cap a district.
Yeah, by capping a block, we can relate it to kind of the built environment and other kind of land use and zoning factors that we feel like there's kind of a rational nexus for us to be able to regulate at the block level. If we were to have a cap on the number of hotels for the city or any particular area, such as the River Arts District or downtown, there was a feeling that it might seem more arbitrary, and it was harder to, I guess, quantify the rationale for doing so.
And Todd, would that apply, do you think, to capping the number of hotel rooms as well?
Yes, I would say that would relate to the number of hotel rooms as well as the number of hotels.
Mm-hmm. Are you at some point in this presentation going to put back up that overlay map so we can take a look at that again?
We certainly can. If we're ready to do that, if Ashley can bring back up the presentation. And there should be a hyperlink on this slide, Ashley, in the title that brings us to the map. Thank you. And when we're ready, you could just hit OK to get rid of this text box. Okay. So this is the map that shows where large and small hotels could be permitted. If you recall, the blue areas on the map are areas where we would allow both large and small hotels. And again, we would define a small hotel as less than 35 hotel rooms, a large hotel larger than 35 hotel rooms. And then the orange shows where only small hotels would be permitted. And then the rest of the city, hotels would not be permitted by right.
Well, I'm just going to jump in because I went and looked at this map, and I'm going to just weigh in on what I was thinking. I would like to eliminate the Asheville Mall property and basically stop south of the current hotels. I would also eliminate the River Ridge Shopping Center.
Wait,
And
when you say back the Asheville Mall, you mean on Tunnel Road, not the Outlet Mall?
Right, the Asheville Mall on Tunnel Road. I apologize.
And then south of where?
I mean, I'm basically saying, when you see the dark area, the dark blue, which indicates a current hotel, what I would say is stop the hotel district south of the current hotels on Tunnel Road, except down south of Sales Village. I mean, I was okay with that, but I would like to preserve the Asheville Mall for other development. I mean, I was really excited about the possibility of that being used for housing. And so I'd prefer not to have it available for hotel. And the same thing on the River Ridge Shopping Center. And then east of South Charlotte Street between Woodfin and College, there's a chunk of blue. And then the other, it looks to me, unless I misunderstood the map, that basically we're putting a blue, the large hotel overlay district on top of the Civic Center. And I mean, I would be opposed to that. And then I would like to suggest that all the River Arts District should be orange and not blue. So that's, I mean, when I went through and kind of looked at the various areas, that would have been my take.
I hear you, but I'm a little bit confused about the mall area and River Ridge area, because to me, that's the area where hotels should be. So could you explain a little bit more about why you're designating those two areas, specifically the mall area and River Ridge?
So my thinking about the Asheville Mall, and it's probably because I got enthused about the proposal for residential on the old Sears area, and the fact that it backs right up against the Kenilworth neighborhood, given that there are no hotels there right now on the Asheville Mall property, I just felt like it was a good opportunity to kind of reclaim that area. And River Ridge, to me, that bumps up against some residential areas. I mean, you've got some apartments that are pretty close by there. You've got the whole Oakley neighborhood, et cetera. And so again, I would like to, if there's going to be redevelopment of that, I would like to have it as an opportunity for residential and or some more local retail. So that was my thinking on those two areas. So.
Okay, because when you mentioned it last time, I was waiting. I was really interested in hearing that. But are you saying just the mall lot, like the huge lot there, or the area around the mall?
Well, when I looked, what I was thinking, Shanika, is so you see you see where the last hotel is on Tunnel Road, mm-hmm. just north of the mall.
Uh-huh.
I would say kind of cut it off right there. And there are a few little, I think David's Bridal, et cetera, is right there. If you zoom, look, I'm like pointing at my screen like, I mean, but it's mostly the Asheville Mall property, I guess, is the big chunk that I was more focused on. I mean, I guess we can split hairs on where it stops and starts, but my biggest thing is the Asheville Mall, that whole property.
Okay, I hear you. Thank you.
And if it just helps, I could give a quick rationale why we included the mall area to begin with. This is one of our identified town centers in the comp plan. It's a large, parcel. We felt like the size of the parcel lent itself, if council wanted it to be able to accommodate both residential and hotel and entertainment. Kind of when we looked at the re-envisioning of indoor malls throughout the country, we left some flexibility with this map to be able to do a hotel and residential, possibly due to the size of the lot. But we could certainly, remove that area if council chooses.
Well, I mean, I think if somebody were to come with a proposal that put, residential and affordable housing and, sort of a whole big development, I would certainly be willing to look at that and possibly enthusiastic about it. But basically what this suggests is that, somebody could put a hotel there without all the great things that go with urban villages.
Well, that's a good question, because Todd, I wouldn't take it to mean that. I might, maybe down closer to the Swananoa River on sites that are not part of the urban village or whatever we're calling it. But on the mall site, which we have designated as a place where we want mixed use, they couldn't just come in and say, I'm going to do a hotel. They have to come in with the bigger mixed use package, right?
Technically, they could come in with just a single use, such as a hotel. The comp plan does provide some guidance that there's a preference for mixed use on the property, but it doesn't necessarily preclude a single use from coming in, depending upon the site and the lot configuration. If you recall, the Sears property is owned by one entity and the mall is owned by another entity. I think we still feel like the property is large enough where if a proposal came in for something, there's an opportunity to do more than just a single use. And we would certainly look at the comp plan, the Living Asheville comp plan as a guide for a preference of having, mixed use there. That would be something that we would evaluate.
But so Todd, I'm confused. I thought what are we calling it? Urban Place?
It's the Urban Place zoning district. This is part of an initiative called Urban Centers, where we have a draft rezoning proposal out there for some areas along Patton Avenue surrounding the former Kmart site, the Steinmart and Ingalls area on Merriman, Walmart property on Bletchley Boulevard, and Innsbrook Mall on Tunnel Road. The current Urban Centers proposal does not include the Asheville Mall. It does include the Innsbrook Mall.
My bad. Can we make it include the Asheville Mall? I mean, so if it doesn't include the Asheville Mall, then I agree with Glenn.
Because the proposal we heard that we never got a chance, we never ended up voting on because it got withdrawn.
Yeah.
Todd, do you remember that project? It had a mixed use apartments, a movie theater, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought we were requiring it to meet urban village or urban
center.
Todd, can I jump in for a minute?
Yeah.
Sure. This is Vidila with Todd's staff. So just a clarification. So the future land use map designates this area in the south as town center, right? So if we want to create a zoning district to implement that vision, which is what we're trying to do now with the urban centers, we need to do that. And at some future point, we will do that. And effectively, what this area would likely become is sort of an urban center like zoning. So the urban center standards that you've already seen or heard of would be similar in this district, but probably with a stronger emphasis on residential. So that zoning is coming in the future, but at this point, all we have is this vision of it transforming into a higher density mixed district.
But the fact that it is that the comp plan treats it that way gives you, staff, I guess, leverage with, like, if someone were to come into the mall area, assuming it all closes and gets redeveloped, or let's just say the Sears property. I mean, I'm with Gwen. I wouldn't want them to just come in with a hotel. We want that to all be mixed use. I would be fine if a hotel is a part of that, because I think that could help fund the rest of it. But so remind me just the leverage that we have to make that happen, just the comp plan and the future land use map. Is that it?
That's correct. Yeah, the comprehensive plan would provide guidance and provide us with leverage for how we review a larger redevelopment project. We would look at the goals of the plan and the purpose and intent of this area, which, as Councilwoman Mayfield, you mentioned, does envision a mixed use area. So that provides us leverage to do that. Mm-hmm. My point was just that the current zoning for this area doesn't necessarily require mixed use, but the comp plan would be a good guiding document for whatever happens there.
So,
oh, I'm sorry, Julie, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, now that proposal that we had for the Sears site has been withdrawn, I mean, can we include the Sears site and the mall site as one of our urban center properties that would be rezoned as that when we finally move forward on that rezoning?
Absolutely. We could certainly consider this site. We are still in the process of meeting with community members on the urban centers rezoning proposal, and it would kind of maybe open up our engagement to speak with folks in this area, because we haven't had an opportunity to do that yet. But we could certainly add this area to the urban centers proposal, and there might be a specific different type of zoning that applies strictly for this area that might even be different than what we're recommending for the other areas.
Yeah. And again, sort of looking all the way down even Tunnel Road there, all of those huge, mega store, big surface lot. I mean, I shop at these places, so I shouldn't say that they're a disaster, but they're a disaster from the land use perspective.
Well, so Todd, I guess what I maybe don't understand is, if we were to put this property in a hotel overlay district, and then we have an urban center district, I mean, it seems to me that you're almost, you're setting it up for confusion. Putting,
we have
making it blue says it should be, or it can be hotels, but then, on top of it, you're putting the urban center. So it's like, well, so which is the defining overlay?
I mean, am I wrong that probably Biltmore Park would be the example of how that would end up? Look, I mean, that's what that would end up being.
Potentially, that's a possible vision, for this area is to look something like that in the future. And Vice Mayor, to your point, the overlay map just says this is where a hotel could be permitted. We would have to also develop those some new zoning standards for a new urban center location here at the mall that would have additional requirements. One of those requirements could be that it has to be mixed use. That's something that we're recommending for the other urban center locations. We're saying that for like every 5,000 square feet of commercial on those other areas, such as the former Kmart site, that for every 5,000 square feet of commercial that you have to have some housing units as well. We haven't developed
I'm wondering,
that for this area, but we could look at that.
Todd, I'm wondering if you could speak to your presentation on the 13th had overlays, the different overlays. It had a base, it had an overlay, and I don't know if you have that available.
I don't believe I have that available. That was one of the slides in the previous presentation.
Yeah, so maybe if you could speak to that, to say that there's a base zoning and then there's the overlay, but they still have to meet both requirements plus the design guidelines for the hotel. So the underlying zoning of the property doesn't go away. The requirements of that.
Absolutely, yeah. So if we rezone this area as one of our urban center locations, we could require that mixed use has to happen. And then the overlay for the hotels just says you're also allowed to have hotels here, and here's additional standards for those hotels. But that underlying zoning, it is in place unless the hotel overlay says something in it that would override that underlying zoning.
And again, Todd, just to be clear, even though right now that urban place zoning doesn't apply to the mall or any of these properties, anywhere, actually, we haven't actually enacted it anywhere. If somebody came forward with a proposal for just a hotel on one of those sites or at the mall or you would say as the staff, this does not meet the future land use map, the future vision for this property, and you need to go back and do something else.
I think the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan, provides us with the leverage to evaluate a larger project to see how it meets or doesn't meet or align with that plan.
Yeah.
And that would be one of the the criteria that we would look at.
Right. Yeah. So I've said what I would do, which is add at least the mall site, the Sears site, and maybe even other parcels in that corridor to our urban center. I would do the same thing with River Ridge. Again, I just think any of these huge commercial, enormous surface parking lots in front of them are all ripe for redevelopment into that urban center concept at some point. Yeah. And I would be perfectly fine for them to stay on this map in terms of, being able to have larger hotels there. Because again, I think hotels would help fund probably some of the housing, would help subsidize some of the housing, and particularly affordable housing that we might want in some of those locations.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Julie that is more my concern, that we get more of these nodes into this, these sort of commercial urban nodes into this urban place zoning. And I'm anxious to see that process speed up. It got delayed and it feels like it's been happening forever. And if we add more property to that picture, that will probably add more delay. And I don't know if it's even possible to do it if it's not in the comp plan, but hopefully it is, because to me that overlay zoning is more protective of the future growth of those areas than sort of hand-picking uses like this. I mean, in my mind, because it's a little hard to predict what all the different things are that would possibly be proposed for these areas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess my concern is, if we're going to put the hotel overlay district on top of these things like right now, and I guess to Julie and to Esther's point, it's taken us a long time to get any agreement on the urban centers. My feeling would be, I'd rather not put the hotel overlay district and then hope that we can get urban center later, but to put the hotel overlay district they can always come back to us with a big project that includes mixed use, et cetera, and a hotel. They can always go through the conditional zoning process.
Well, and you could also say when we adopt the urban place zoning, which is going to require a rezoning process just like this, we could
make it blue.
Back in if we felt like
Right.
it would work.
Mhm.
Right. But I mean, you know, for me, I'd rather less hotel overlay district and more urban center than the other way around. And I just feel like it's taken a really long time for us. I mean, you know, I think we've been working on this, 2 years, and we haven't gotten any, we haven't actually been able to rezone yet. So, and this process to me feels like it's going faster, which is good. I mean, I think the hotel moratorium is pushing that. But, you know, given that and given the timing, my feeling would be, you know, reduce the hotel overlay. And then if later on we get it to be an urban center, then we can always add the hotel overlay on top of that later.
Yeah, it might actually incentivize the property owners in those areas for us, you know, to want us to hurry up and do the urban center.
Todd, other than council sitting here and redrawing your overlay map, what other vetting process are you going to be using going forward for the overlay map? I mean, are you still gathering input from the community and property owners about the map?
Our next steps after the council work session this afternoon is to present an update to the Planning and Zoning Commission at their meeting in early November. And then to meet again with the downtown and riverfront commissions, and then come back to Planning and Zoning Commission. So that's basically our process after today.
So I would be interested in going through the other areas that Gwen mentioned. And as long as we've brought in the urban center zoning, my understanding, and I could be wrong, my understanding is that is on hold largely because of neighborhood concerns related to the Kmart site. So I'm wondering if it would be possible to move forward with the zoning for the other locations that perhaps are not so controversial and continue to address the neighborhood concerns around the Kmart site. And then when those are addressed and resolved, move forward on that site, because we have been working on this for a long time.
We could certainly take a look at that option and to continue to move the project forward.
Okay. So can we zoom in on downtown? Because Gwen had a couple of areas there. And I also noticed that the blue spot over the Civic Center, which didn't.
I mean, it's a little like, why did staff zone the Civic Center? Is this just in case one day it's Civic Center?
No, great question. The orange area looks very jagged, and that basically follows the lines of our National Historic District for the downtown, and it made it easier for us to tie that small hotel area, tie it to the underlying local historic district when drawing the boundaries. But that doesn't mean we can't make, changes to that as well. We can. It just but that's the rationale of why we chose the boundaries for the small hotel and large hotels in this area is based on that National Historic District boundary.
Can we zoom in on that a little bit? And I can't believe I'm going to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it. The Haywood Page property, is it? I guess we're about to see, but where is it, in the orange or is it in the blue there?
If we could zoom in a little bit more, Ashley, and then let's just wait for it to reload. So that is it is in the small hotel district area, that orange area.
Yes, I see.
Whereas the Civic Center, just on the right side of Haywood Street, is just falls within that large hotel category.
So is that Rankin? Does Rankin Avenue run through that blue? So hard. I think it does.
I believe so. You're right.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I don't know that I feel strongly about that. And then is the eastern edge of that Lexington Avenue?
The eastern end of the large hotel district, kind of the northern part of the screen, that is Lexington.
Yeah. Okay.
So for the majority of Lexington falls in that orange color, the small hotel area, but not the large hotel area.
That's really just that parking lot that's down there, right?
That's really close to like I-240. It's like the intersection of Hiawassee and Lexington and Woodfin, that intersection.
Yeah.
So kind of, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I certainly understand the rationale for it, but I think I would agree with Gwen that, like I don't think I don't know who owns that parking lot down there on Lexington, but I don't think we would want somebody to build a really large hotel there that, I mean, in some ways it's right next to the interstate. Sure, it makes sense. But at the same time, Lexington is one of our gateways into the city, and we probably wouldn't want a big hotel right there.
Is the problem that we can't have holes in this map and make it look like Swiss cheese because we're going to run into a spot zoning problem?
We probably don't want a Swiss cheese looking map with holes, but I think we could certainly scale back the boundaries and make it large contiguous areas.
And so, Ashley, can you move the map to the north? And Gwen pointed out, no, sorry, the other way around. I guess move it south. I'm sorry, move it south. So yeah, this little blue area here, help us understand where this is.
Let's see. So we're on South Lexington and Biltmore Avenue. This is where we have the hotel that's built or under construction today on Biltmore. That backs up onto Lexington. That was part of the approval that had the 3 homes, like historic homes that were repurposed.
Mm-hmm.
That there's like a block. There's a hotel. I believe that might be that property, which was the former city health services lot.
So what was the thinking about making this blue rather than orange?
The blue here was, I think, just to capture that hotel. Having access to Biltmore Avenue, we thought had some good kind of access to that area of Biltmore Avenue. You can see on the map though it's kind of a limited area in that the southern portion of downtown. But you do see, I guess, in the northern part of the screen, it's small, then large, and then small again. But if there's a desire to make this area a small hotel area also, we could certainly look into that.
Here's what I would say, just because I'm getting nervous. We're going to run ourselves right into a work session number 3. This will come back to us eventually, and it's going to, as Todd mentioned, it's got to do some more, it's got to go through some more vetting processes. So why don't we see how it comes out on the other end and make further changes? But council, is there any objection to making the changes so far mentioned by Gwen or Julie or anyone else? Does anyone object to those suggestions being council's direction to staff at this point to modify this map as it makes its way back through these other committees? Is that okay?
With the understanding this is Councilman Young, with the understanding that this is all coming back, possibly to another council, I'm okay with the changes.
Todd, did you get all those changes? If you didn't, Gwen will.
I'm happy to sit down and point it out.
Okay.
It's,
Okay.
Because I spent a good amount of time, sort of saying about this. So I'm happy to sit down and talk it through.
Great.
I mean, it wasn't clear.
Yeah, and I've written down how the video, but also, we could touch base, or if you want to forward me an email with those locations and descriptions, I'm happy to take a look at that.
And I don't mind it going through right now, but I would like an explanation of how you would make the both overlays work.
And
The
sorry.
when you say both overlays, Nikki, you mean like the hotel overlay and then the
urban, yes.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
And Todd, we've gotten some questions about, again, Ashley, if you can keep moving south on the map, I guess. This drawing the line there at Cox Avenue as opposed to Ashland Avenue, and can you offer some explanation about that?
Why not bring it all the way over to Ashland?
Yes. Or
Right.
Maybe even draw the line. I mean, my assumption about not drawing it all the way over to Ashland is because that's obviously much nearer to old established residential neighborhoods. But I don't know if you could even, sort of cut those property lines down, mid block between Ashland and Cox, or I don't know. I'm curious about your thinking there.
We staff took a look at this area again after some conversations with some community members, and we feel that we can extend the small hotel boundary to go onto the west side of Cox and capture some of the smaller parcels there, but still keep it away from Ashland Avenue. Our intent was to try to stay away from Ashland Avenue and any residential that's on the west side of Ashland. But the map looks a little funny that it divides Cox Avenue right down the line and only has small hotels on the right side. We think, looking at the lots there, that we could extend the small hotel boundary to include some of those properties on the west side of Cox Avenue, but still keep it away from Ashland.
I would like to chime in just for a second. I already feel very defeated in this whole process, but it seems to me that maybe we should look at reducing the amount of blue on this map. And for many of us, don't want to see a lot of large hotels being built, and there's a lot of blue on this map. There's room for a whole lot of large hotels to be built. I struggle going downtown right now during a pandemic with the amount of people that are down there and the amount of tourists going around. If we build large hotels in all this blue area, we're going to be overrun with tourists. I mean, it seems like a safer process just to reduce this amount of blue and take this one step at a time. And try to reduce the amount of large hotels being built, especially in downtown or the River Arts District.
And I have a follow-up question to one that Brian asked a while ago related to the River Arts District. And we were in the middle of the discussion about how hotels can be limited to one per block. And then Brian asked, can we restrict, remove the whole district? And the response was no, probably not, because that would be arbitrary, capricious, something like that. Would it be possible to also limit the number of hotels within contiguous blocks? Meaning if there's one hotel on one block, you can't have a hotel on another block.
So Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably the way that would work is like other zoning that involves distances, where you say, okay, you take an existing hotel and you do with no additional hotels within 500 feet, or it triggers a conditional zoning review by council or something like that. Could you do that? I think that's kind of what you're getting at, Antoinette, that you have kind of this density.
Mhm.
That would be my recommendation if council desires that type of restriction or requirement, that we have a separation, a distance, a minimum separation between hotels.
And then how do we come up with that number? Can the number be so large that it's literally one hotel in the whole district?
Yeah, and I can maybe, you could do 200 feet or 500 feet. I mean, we could base it on something that, I think that the issue that could arise, and this is why we didn't recommend this at first, is that once one hotel comes in and that separation requirement is there, say it's 500 feet, that might preclude a location that might be a good location for a hotel. Whereas, you know, if
is it really ever a good location for a hotel?
Well, I mean, I'll leave that up to you all, but I think that, you know, the intent of the overlay district was to set those boundaries to where we thought might be an appropriate location. But certainly I can understand a concern that even with the map, it doesn't stop a large number of hotels necessarily from coming into any given area. But the separation requirement is something that we could consider if council chooses.
I kind of laugh because the other circumstance that's used in is adult establishments, like strip joints. But that's basically what we're talking about.
Todd, would it be legal for us to just flat out limit the size of hotels? I mean, could we just say there will never be another hotel larger than 100 rooms built in the city of Asheville? Well, I mean, again, there are implications to that I don't fully appreciate or understand, but yeah.
I think that that would just become another council threshold that someone could still apply for a conditional zoning to request
I see.
their building to be larger than what's allowed.
Council, I kind of feel like we're walking our way right back into the system we're using now. I just want to point that out. And this is a lot of work. I mean, you know, if you'll recall right now, there's only 2 spots in the city where and I'm forgetting the name of the zoning, but it's where the Grove Park Inn is, and I believe
In the Crown Plaza.
The Crown Plaza property. Otherwise, it's a conditional zoning and it comes to council for review. So it's a fairly simple system, actually. I mean, if you think about it, because they all just come to council for review, and we can take them on a case-by-case basis. This, you know, here we're trying to set up this incredible web of trying to guess what will be a hotel of concern versus so, and for some people that will be every hotel. For some people that will be most hotels. So anyway, I wonder.
I hear what you're saying, Esther. But at the same time, I do feel like this effort has been, I mean, even if we do have, you know, a third of the hotels that are going to have to come to council, I think the whole process of setting up these benefits and design review, et cetera, I think it's really going to help the hotel developer community to understand what our goals and values are. And so I think it helps us a lot more, give them guidance on the kind of things we're going to take into consideration when we either approve or don't approve hotels. So, I mean, I hope that staff doesn't feel like this has just been an exercise in futility, because I think a lot of the work around, the design and thinking about these maps and the benefits, really do go a long way in giving giving the development community some sort of guidance. But whereas before it was just like, well, whatever, any council member on any given day feels. I mean, at least this lays out some of our thinking and some of our values.
But could it not stay like it is, and folks, developers still have to meet these same guidelines that are being proposed here?
Well, what you mean, like with the restrictions in the size and the height and the locations?
And the public benefits or just, we've managed so far with it, and if developers knew that they would have to meet that threshold, but if they had any hopes of getting approved, that make that clear.
I think in that case, the public benefits could be outlined in in a conditional zoning district, but it would still mean that every hotel comes to city council. All of them would continue to come to city council. We would try to outline the public benefits in that conditional zoning district. But again, a developer could request to deviate from those benefits and negotiate with council on what benefits best mitigate their project and contribute to a more positive development.
Todd, I'm wondering if this is an opportunity for Brad to kind of outline maybe some of the impacts of that.
Sure. I think that I can answer the question Councilman Haynes asked, at least in part, by saying that it would appear to me that this proposed framework would expand significantly on what we're calling public benefits in terms of those items that could be included in an eventual proposal, which may be beyond the scope of what is legally permissible under the traditional conditional zoning process. So I do think that you are seeing numerous items, as well as the scale of those items, which can be included under this type of a process, which probably go beyond what is legally justifiable, just in general speaking, in a traditional conditional zoning request for the B1 conditions. So hopefully that adds a little clarity to that opinion.
Okay, folks, it's 4:06. Todd, tell us the rest of what we're going to need to get through here today.
Almost finished. I think there's maybe just one or two more slides. Just to recap,
okay,
really quickly, that at the October 13th work session, we had some substantive review and comments from you all about the public benefits table. Staff continues to look at that table. Any modifications that could be made to the following that are shown on this slide. So we continue to take a look at these. These were some of the issues that were raised by council on October 13th. Next slide, please.
Todd, so are we on discussion and question now?
We can, or keep moving along. I think I just really had one more slide.
That was the next slide.
Wraps up the timeline and next steps, but if there are any questions.
Let's look at that real quick, just so folks know what to expect.
I'm sorry, there was one more
Oh,
concern, and that just had to deal with the makeup of the design review board. I know this is something that was just introduced to you all for the first time this afternoon, but a question that had come up at the Riverfront Commission meeting was whether to have all members or majority of the members have a design experience or just an interest in design. Just something for you all to consider is the makeup of the membership of the design review board.
On that point, I think that this issue for me of who's on this design review board, this is more flexible for me depending on whether or not the council is involved in the review as well. But this, what you've explained is that this review board is going to be doing more of a technical review. I mean, they're looking to see if it physically meets the requirements, right?
The physically meets the design guidelines.
Right. Okay. So it is kind of, I mean, I don't like having all design professionals on review boards like this, because I do think that sometimes they miss the layperson's perspective on these buildings. And I think that's important to include as well. So I would hope it would be kind of a mix, but I do understand why design professionals need to be included, and they understand the logistics of construction and what are the different possibilities. And they're often able to make suggestions like, why don't you use these different kind of windows I'm aware of because I use them in a construction project myself and I think they're a better product, or whatever the case may be. So I get, but I like a blend personally.
And Todd, I appreciate the sort of classes of people that you pulled out. Sorry, I've got a mosquito. But I think, my experience is that a lot of design professionals bring that, it's certainly the ADA perspective, because they're used to designing for ADA. I would agree with you that probably not everybody brings a perspective around either transit or bike ped or things like that, although certainly a lot of people do. I think there could be ways that, you could build those interests into the design professionals that are there. But I guess I don't feel strongly. It should absolutely be a majority of design professionals, because otherwise it's like, well, I don't like brick buildings. Well, I don't like, it's those of us who are not design professionals are, I think we just have less to say.
Is it possible that we can put quotas around stuff like lay people and different expertise?
This might be a question for legal in terms of the makeup. I think, in we can kind of encourage certain types of folks we want on the board. In terms of a quota, I'm not sure if that would be more of a goal, a council goal, but I'm not sure if that's something that we could actually enforce.
Todd, I can probably assist with that. So the ability for council to establish this new board came out of the brand new state legislation redoing and recodifying state or city and county development regulations, which is commonly referred to as 160D. And you guys have updated some of our rules to coordinate with the 160D changes. 160D-304 is the brand new statute statewide that allows for this commission to be formed. And what it requires only is that all the members shall be residents of your jurisdictional area. So it must be within the city for all members. And the appointments have to be made in such a manner as that just a majority of the members, regardless, in our case, if you adopted the 9-member format, 5 members have to have special training or experience in a design field such as architecture, landscape design, horticulture, city planning, or a related field. Beyond that, there are no specific requirements. So for those remaining members, city council can put in place whatever requirements or lack thereof that they chose.
Thank you.
You have included there the special interest in what we were told earlier, and that special interest could be that you're wanting to protect your neighborhood from gentrification, and that's what could it not be that? Could that not fall under special interest? Or?
I don't know who you were directing that to, Brian, but I'll weigh in.
Earlier in the presentation where it showed the 9 members, it had the things that you just mentioned, but they said they had added the special interest as part of that.
I think that's absolutely open for those remaining members. Up to 4 members of the board could absolutely be classified as a special interest any way the council wished to define it.
Well, and I would just say, I'm fine with the majority being there, but I agree with Esther. I think it's important to have laymen on these boards, commissions as well, so that their point of view is seen.
Yeah, I mean, my only caveat to that would be that we wouldn't want to appoint people who are just going to say no to every hotel on the design review board. Like, we need to make the decision about hotels over here. And then once we've made those decisions, then the design review board needs to be about design, not about relitigating, do we have hotels in this particular location? So that would be keep the fights in the appropriate venues. There can be plenty of fights about design, but
okay, well, maybe I used the wrong special interest, but I'm still supportive of that being in there.
Yeah, I was thinking more, there's been a couple of projects that have gotten a lot of community pushback in terms of their appearance that just seem to be missed in the design review. I think lay folks might have just sort of stated the obvious that the proposals were pretty ugly, actually. So they might have been able to catch that.
Okay. If we have no other questions, I think there is just one last slide on next steps. If Ashley, you can bring up the presentation. Thank you. So the tentative project schedule, I mentioned before that staff would present an update to the Planning and Zoning Commission on November 4th. We would also would present some updates to the Downtown Riverfront Commissions. P&Z, the idea is that in December, we would continue our conversation for a public hearing on this item with a recommended vote by Planning and Zoning Commission in January, and then council review and a public hearing in late January with a council vote in early February. If you recall, the moratorium ends on February 23rd. So this schedule would allow us to stay on target with the ending of the moratorium in February.
So, listening to all of this, and I think, Gwen, you articulated it very well in terms of this ordinance coming together to be better reflective of the community and council concerns around hotel growth and development. It does seem that it could be nimble enough, and Todd, you tell me if I'm wrong, that if there is ultimately at the end of the line a decision made that all hotel applications will still come to council, it sounds to me though like we could still use the overlay map in terms of the size of hotel, the locations of hotels, the design review, the review structure, the boards, all of that could still exist and be adopted even if ultimately it was determined that all hotel applications had to go to council as a conditional zoning. Do you feel that that's accurate, that we could still use all the pieces of this?
Yes, with the exception of some of the public benefits. And this is what Brad.
Right, because the public benefits helped a hotel avoid council, but council could still, as we have before, negotiate public benefits as a part of the conditional zoning process.
That's right.
Well, but I thought there were some of the public benefits that frankly we can't negotiate.
Well, but we do.
Well, we don't. I mean, we don't technically. I mean, go back to the public benefits.
We do. They're just not enforceable
as conditions.
Right. But I think actually, if we keep this process, they are more enforceable in the sense that, you don't get points. And so.
That's a good distinction to make. That's a good distinction.
Right. So, I mean, I really would encourage all of us to sit down and talk to Brad and really understand where we are in threading this needle here. And I feel like given this framework and given this point system, et cetera, really, well, again, you guys are the attorneys, not me, but I think it just gives us a bigger, a much more solid couple legs to stand on.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that's a good point. I just, right. You're right. I mean, at this point, the things that we have negotiated with hotel developers are not true contractual conditions. They are promises made in the process of obtaining a conditional zoning approval.
Right.
So then I would suggest that for those benefits that we do not require, that the points that they're given far exceed others. An example for me would be, I don't even remember that number of points you need, but if you give $1 million to the reparations fund,
right,
you're right there at what you need.
Right.
But
I think, and again, I certainly do not hold myself out as any sort of an attorney, but it was my understanding of this whole idea of the point system, et cetera, it was an incentive not to become a conditional zoning. Yeah. And that if it becomes a conditional zoning, then all, the whole point system, et cetera, really kind of goes out the window.
It's not a condition, it's an incentive.
Right. It becomes guidance for us. I mean, they could still check the boxes and say, look, on your chart, I'm coming here with 220 points and giving you lots of the things that you want. And we could say, okay, that's great. Or we could, for whatever reason, say, yeah, not enough. I mean,
but the distinction is that under the proposed system, these would be enforceable because you exactly. Would have to accumulate the points, do the things to avoid the council review. And if we were to just continue with the council review process as a conditional zoning, the things that are included in the public benefits list are not contractually enforceable. They would have to just be promises made by a developer.
Right. And so I guess that's the thing for me is like, I want them. I mean, it's frustrating to me when, the developers sit there and go, oh, yeah, don't worry, that'll happen. But, 6 years from now, we have no idea. And really, we have no leverage. I think this really helps us have that leverage, because we've incentivized them not to come in front of council. But again, I mean, maybe rather than I just think that maybe it's a conversation that we all need to understand with Brad. I'm just concerned if all of a sudden we just go back and say, well, everything has to come through CZ. I just feel like, well, then these other, the benefits aren't enforceable and we go back to where we were. And frankly, there were a lot of council members who approved hotels that there's no way we got these kind of public benefits.
No, I think that's a really important distinction to make. And so before we close out, this is it right now for council in terms of our direction to staff. They're going to tweak this based on what we said here today, and then go back, as Todd mentioned, through this process. So it will come back to city council. On the suggestion Antoinette had about the density restriction, Todd, are you going to, council, are you in agreement with adding that? And I don't think we settled on a number, like 500 feet or we didn't settle on a number, but how do we want to handle that? Do we want to have staff take a look at that and try to incorporate some kind of density restriction? Is there any objection to that? And what I assume this would mean is if the proposal violated the density restriction, again, it would kick it into that conditional zoning if it was in the overlay to come to council.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's hard. I'm not going to make the decision on these, so it sort of doesn't matter. But what I think, but at the same time, like when I think about the west side of downtown, which at this point is largely surface parking lots and underutilized buildings, you know, if we wanted to put 10 hotels over there, that's where they should go, frankly. Like,
you're not talking about Haywood Road.
Yeah,
everyone.
Yeah, between Haywood and Patton, that whole west side of downtown, like, you know, I wouldn't care if there were 5 hotels over there. I really don't think I would, because there's nothing else over there right now except surface parking lots. Nobody goes there.
Would you not rather housing?
Well, I don't, I mean,
you're talking about like on the Smoky Park corridor towards exit 44.
No. I'm talking about in downtown, between
just beyond the other hotels that were built.
Exactly, like just beyond the Indigo and all that. That, you know, that's just so it's sort of like, do you create kind of a quote unquote sacrifice zone where you might cluster hotels, and so they're all there together and they're not impacting the rest of downtown, which can remain vibrant and interesting and not full of more hotels. I mean, I'm with you, Brian, but they can build hotels. I mean, just because they don't build a hotel doesn't mean we're going to get housing. They can build housing there right now, and nobody is, because apparently
they're waiting to build hotels.
Yes, they are waiting to build hotels. I suppose that's your point. If we do limit, you know, I mean, gets back to my theory of the market, which apparently I don't understand. But right, if we say over in that area you can only have 5 hotels, if that's the way it works out, then maybe the rest of it will develop as housing or something else. Maybe so. Yeah.
I just hope that staff names it the sacrifice zone.
This is a concept in the world that I work in. You know, there are places that are so impacted by people that they're just sacrifice zones, and you know that they're not ever going to be pristine environmentally, and you just let it go.
So I'm interested in exploring it. I'm interested in staff exploring the, you know, density or distance between hotels, but I'm not married to it one way or the other. The only question, and you kind of skipped over this, and I just wanted to ask this question, and we don't even have to discuss it. But at the last meeting, we talked about the eliminating or relooking at the green building benefits, because someone made the point that really these hotels are already being built to preserve or, you know, to have good energy consumption. And so I would like staff to just talk about that sometime, and, you know, not give people credit for things that they would automatically be doing. So just that as I was looking back over the last presentation, that was just a question for me. But Todd, you don't even have to talk about it right now, just, you know, later on.
The only thing I would say on that is there are continuous efforts afoot nationally and at the state level to reduce the requirements around energy efficiency. And this is not green building. This is just plain old building efficient buildings. So I do think having a higher standard that is higher than what they would normally be required to build is a good incentive, because I don't count on the standard building code continuing to require high. I mean, they don't. We're already 6 years behind the International Building Code. So in North Carolina, our building code is not where it should be.
Todd, I was wanting to look at the bus pass situation. To me, if you don't offer a living wage, you shouldn't get points for giving a bus pass. they should go hand in hand. And I don't know how you all want to rate that individually, but yeah, to me, you don't get points for a bus pass if you don't get a living wage.
Yeah, I don't know if you need points for a bus pass anyhow. I mean, that's not given very much.
Well, so guys, that came from me. So
I mean, I appreciate the bus passes, but I just don't know how many points you ought to get for it. Maybe one.
Well, we can argue about the points, but the city encourages employers to provide bus passes to their employees to help keep cars off the road, help reduce the need for parking. I mean, there are a lot of benefits for that. So I think incentivizing.
I don't want to overstate it, Julie. I'm all in support of bus passes. I just felt like we have given folks too much credit for just giving people a bus pass.
And my point is they need to be coupled together, because a lot of people who would normally get bus passes and need bus passes are people who can't afford transportation. So why not give them a living wage so that they can make plans for providing transportation for their families?
Yeah, it could just be tied in with a living wage. You offer a living wage and provide a bus pass.
So I wonder if on the chart with the points, if you could say living wage is however many points, and that you can add to that by doing a bus pass, but you can't jump to bus pass. You got to do, it's an add-on if you're already doing a living wage.
Exactly. Thank you.
We could certainly do that.
And I wonder if there's other items too that should be tiered like that, where, we want to see this, this, and this first. And then if you want to move up, you can do these other things, but you can't do those first. We want to see these base things first. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, I think that was a conversation that we had the last time, that we don't want to see people cobbling together, 10 points here, 10 points here, 20 points here. And it really is not making a big splash from the standpoint of community benefits. So however that can be incorporated, that concept can be incorporated, I think is what both Shanika and Esther are saying.
And Todd, I don't think we included public art as one of those public benefits. And certainly in comparison to, I think from my view, and probably from the view of most people on council, public art doesn't rise to the level of living wages and bus passes and green building and all of that. But at the same time, it ain't like the city's paying for public art.
Just to clarify, we do have it's 30 points right now for a $300 per room contribution for the art fund.
Okay, sorry, I've forgotten that.
And then just so you all know, the bus pass right now is only worth 10 points. And again, for like a larger hotel in downtown would be required to have 180 points. So, the way we tried to structure the table today is that you have to choose one of these really impactful public benefits, like affordable housing, one of the higher end affordable housing options, or like a LEED gold or platinum built type building, along with a number of these smaller benefits, like the bus pass, for example, or like public art or another neighborhood type improvement.
Hey, Todd, this is Keith. I'd like to throw out a suggestion to add into the public benefits portion, which is if these developments are going to be paying a living wage, to also partner with the Inclusive Hiring Partners Program with the Chamber of Commerce.
Great.
Okay, so we do need to wrap it up because we have a city council meeting to head into here. Is there anything else that we want to add? Any further direction to staff on this? Okay, if not, all right, then we'll adjourn from this work session and we'll be back on at 5 for the city council meeting. Okay, thanks.